Hi all, we're going to look at another game of Fischer from his My 60 Memorable Games book. This time he was white against Ruben Shocron in a 1959 tournament of Mar del Plata. So in 1960 Fischer had won this tournament. This year he did do well, and Shocron was another Argentinian champion. After e4, Shocron played e5, and we saw a Roy Lopez. So bishop b5, after a6, bishop a4. This is all Roy Lopez opening theory. So bishop e7, white plays rook e1 now, and black now plays b5. So theoretical so far, bishop b3, and now d6. This is the closed variation of the Roy Lopez. Black is preparing to do a later knight a5, so he's first reinforcing the e5 pawn. After c3, white's intention is to grab more central control with d4. Black castled, and now white played h3. So the idea of this is to stop the potentially annoying pin of bishop g4 here. Especially annoying if white did, want to play d4, because that would mean black's exerting more pressure on d4. So knight a5, bishop c2, and now black plays c5. So stretching out on the queenside, gaining space. White now plays d4, and black now plays queen c7. So there's almost the temptation to just close up the centre with d5. But if white did that, then c4 and knight b7 to c5 would be easy positional moves from black to use that c5 square and improve the position of the knight. So instead Fischer kept his options open and kept that central tension going. He played knight d2. After bishop d7 he played knight f1. So we see here classical rerouting of this knight from the queen side to try and head either for the f5 square, which is quite typical, but in this game also the d5 square, because Fischer actually rerouted it now to e3 instead of g3. g3 seems a bit more committal. Knight e3 seems a lot more flexible here. It's not only got ideas of eyeing these two squares, but also maybe it can jump into g4 later, as we'll see. After g6, black is conceding some dark square weaknesses now. So how will Fischer exploit these theoretically weaker dark squares? Well, what he does is first take on e5. So that's quite an interesting decision in itself. And now plays knight h2. So with e5 as a sort of pawn target, if a knight's rerouting to g4, it will be adding more pressure to that e5 pawn. After rook a d8, the queen also is given that f3 square by this knight retreat to h2, so it moves to f3, also eyeing the f6 square. So potentially Fischer's rerouting now one of the knights to g4 and attacking simultaneously both these key squares, tying the queen down at the moment on c7. So here Shocron played knight takes g4, and again, although it structurally damages white a little bit, there is a small side effect in terms of white's dynamic counterplay with later hg as Fischer took. So he's accepting double pawns because potentially he's got g3, king g2, rook h1, trying to target that h pawn on the semi-open file. After queen c6, he first though plays a very interesting pawn sacrifice. He plays g5. Let's quickly examine if black had taken knight d5, bishop takes c1. Fischer's weakened the dark squares a little bit. Say he plays knight f6 as a Zwischenzug before recapturing. That's very important, otherwise black will play bishop takes d5 at the end of this. King h8, and now taking on c1 with the a rook to keep the options open for this rook to sort of come in for an attack, potentially. Now this is a very critical variation. Say rook f8, queen g3 now is a very logical move to come to h4 to attack h7. Queen c7, queen h4, king g7, and now Fischer, could in this variation secure a draw if he wants with knight h5 check. Because if the king moves to h8, queen f6 is mating. If king g8, that's also seems quite dangerous. White can continue the attack here with, say, rook e3, or just carry on with the checks, so knight f6 check. Say white didn't want to draw, with here queen g5 and queen f6. Here is a critical variation I've looked at with Rybka, rook e3. Black can just about save himself with this f5 now, it seems, and secure a slightly better position in this critical variation. So let's go back. In the game, Black didn't accept this pawn sack. He played knight c4, and Fischer now played knight g4. So he's eyeing now to come into f6, and it's here Black conceded the light squared bishop, which at the moment seems no big deal because this bishop's not really doing much. It's stuck behind that pawn. Black seems to have nice, rook on that d file, nice pressure on e4. Black's position seems quite natural, and with less kingside issues to worry about, with these knights being removed from white. So what does white do with the two bishops? Well, Fischer's next plan seems to be first to get his king to g2 to have the flexibility of putting pressure on the h file. So he puts now his rook on h1. But now, after encouraging that knight to go to f8, which seems to be a rather passive square, maybe it should have come to c5. But Fischer uses this opportunity to try and open the bishops by opening the queenside. As a prelude to doing that, he offers another pawn sack now, which is again not taken. By playing b4, he's potentially sacking his c pawn. Here is a critical variation, again I've looked at with Rybka. If white can come in like this, the two bishops are much more opened up now, and actually this favours white, even though white's a pawn down. This is going to be good for white, this kind of variation. So basically Black didn't want to open up the bishops like that, and he didn't accept this pawn sack on c3. But Fischer's now got a4 if Black's not accepting it. But first Fischer avoids the exchange of queens, and Black even volunteers a5, so again accelerating the opening up of these bishops. So Fischer takes on a5, and then after bishop e3, queen takes, he plays a4. Again, offering this c3 pawn. But this is looking quite dangerous. After queen takes c3, ab5. White's getting the more open position for his bishops. In the game, rook a8 was played. After ab, queen b5, rook hb1. So Fischer's working on the queen side now temporarily, and he's going to work his way back to the black king. After queen c6, rook b6, queen c7. Now rook ba6. So Fischer's reinforcing control of the a file, saying to Black, get out of the a file, or let me play rook a7. Black took on a6, and you can see now there's pressure building up here. This bishop is liberated finally to be able to use the a4 square, where it will have more significance in the game rather than being just hemmed in by the e4 pawn. So Fischer successfully opened up for the bishops basically. After rook c8, queen g4, the queen is returning to quite a dominant diagonal as well, difficult for Black to challenge. So there's all sorts of pressure going on now. And look at this crossfire square of the rook and queen. That's going to become critical soon. After knight e6, has the knight got any good squares? Well, no, because this pawn on c3 stopping knight d4, but maybe c5's going to be used. Fischer plays here bishop a4, and look at the bishops now. Look at these squares being controlled by them. Let's have a look actually just quickly. Knight c5, there's rook c6, so that bishop is already very tactically useful. This is very horrible because the queen is also going to win that rook in conjunction with the rook on c6. So Black hasn't got very natural moves. He's under real pressure here. He has to be very careful, and in such a position he did slip up. After rook c6, queen d8, Fischer played a beautiful exchange sacrifice now. He played rook takes e6. Now let's see if Black had taken this. Queen takes e6, king g7, taking on e5, and the two bishops really coming alive now. Bishop d4 with nasty threats now like queen g7. So say rook a8, bishop b5, rook a5, check, check. Black would have to give up the exchange and is just left with an utterly miserable and lost position here. So basically Shocron decided to play queen c8, but he didn't see this deep enough. There's a nasty shot here. I wonder if you can spot it, the final move of the game. I'll give you 5 seconds starting from now. Fischer played bishop d7, and that's it. Shocron can't play queen takes d7 because of rook takes g6 check, winning the black queen. I hope you enjoyed that game. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.